television or movie screen is the closest most people will ever come to the forensic world, but Jennifer was raised in it. She was the daughter of a small town medical examiner whose office was in their home. She investigated her first fatality, an airplane crash, when she was 8 years old, picking up body parts with her father, who saw it as an anatomy lesson. And I just have to tell you guys, we did our Zoom test with Jennifer earlier this week, and we ended up talking for like 45 minutes because it's so fascinating. And forensics, so important. A recent statistic is that 242 people have been exonerated they were convicted of murder, and then they were exonerated solely due to DNA testing. And there is a push to do DNA testing for all convicted murderers for that reason. So very important. And as a forensic consultant, Jennifer frequently consults with TV writers on shows such as Bull, Conviction, Hawaii Five-0, Leverage, Suits, and Rectify. She also has an Amazon top-selling mystery novel series, The Coroner's Daughter. Good morning, Jennifer.
Good morning, ladies.
Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm like just glowing because I caught the last part of your speaker. That was Melanie, right?
Yes,
and
Melanie.
Watching Beth in, and it's like, oh my goodness, this is such a lovely community. And like now I'm going to talk about death. But I promise it'll be sunshine and roses, and we'll have a great time.
Sunshine and rosy death. We love it.
And you will laugh and hopefully learn.
So, I'm excited.
You have amazing stories. So.
You do. It's going to be great.
Well, we'll get a few of those. We'll get a few of those too. So,
okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
But yay. Thank you all for having me when you guys contacted me. So I've been speaking and teaching for a long time. And normally when I get asked to talk about forensics or, death investigation, or it's usually to writers. So this is such a treat, such a treat that I get to talk to what I consider are like the real heroes in this journey of forensics. So let me I have a lot of things to share with you guys today. Let me just adjust things okay, here we go. I've got to adjust a few things because I just got on, and I want to also share a screen with you guys. And all right, so thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here. I'm sure many of you hear so many things about criminal investigation. You have way more stories than I do. So when I was asked to join your lovely conference today, I said, well, what do you guys, I'm thinking you guys probably know a lot. And really what we're just going to cover and we're going to talk about is sort of what's the process. So I'm calling it basically from crime to courtroom. what kind of things happen in between, just to give a really sort of broad, it comes, you guys get to hear it at the end of the process when it's finally, whatever criminal investigation is finally brought to court. So I'm going to give you sort of what happens before all of that. And before let me pull up something. I need to paste hold on one second. I need to paste a link for you guys. So I have a free gift for everybody, and I'm going to paste it in the chat as soon as I can copy it here. Let's see. Okay, there it goes. So first of all, I want to give you guys all something free today because there's just not enough time, obviously, to cover everything. And a lot of people ask too, like, where can I get more information? And so I am giving you guys this link to a little a 40-page booklet that I've created has all kinds of like 50 different forensic resources that I've been using over the years that I've sort of culminated and think are kind of the best ones out there. It has a couple sample chapters of my true crime thriller in there. It has all kinds of blogs, memes, infographics that have to do with forensics that I've been just creating over the years. So just kind of a nice little resource guide. So when you get a chance, click on that and grab your free gift. So, and I'm also going to do a couple book giveaways. So I have, I have The Coroner, which is first in the series, Secret Remains, which is the second in the series, these I'm actually adapting for Lifetime, so hopefully they will be on screen in the near future. And then I have this book. This was actually my first book, called Forensic Speak, and this is a forensic resource guide. It's basically a forensic science boot camp in a book. So these are the 3 books I'm going to give away, and these lovely ladies are going to help me do a drawing as we go through here. Okay, let's see. What else do I want to share with you before we get going? Yeah, I'm definitely going to leave time for question and answer. So if you have questions, pop them in the chat or ask them when we get to those little breaks. And I think I will share my screen now. And hopefully this will work. Where is my screen? Let's try that. I don't know if that's, oh, okay. Let's see if this will work. Sorry. And let's try this little button here and see if this will work. Oh, yay, it worked. Oh, that's funny. I'm like on the bottom. That's a new feature. All right. Okay. Make sure okay, perfect. All right, so here's the free book I was just talking about for you guys. And okay. I'll just give you just a little bit about me so you kind of know where this is all coming from. So I'm Jennifer, and I grew up in a forensic home. People often ask me, like, how did you get into all this? I'm like, I really just didn't have a choice. I grew up in a forensic home. My father was a medical examiner for 3 counties in northern Michigan, and the office was in our house. So everything came home. Death investigation was a family business. My mom was like the office administrator. She also worked in medical transcription, maybe a close cousin to you guys. So she kind of did all of the office keeping, and my dad did all of course, the investigation and medical part. And it was just always around us. There were files on the kitchen table and videos and pictures, and he used our family Suburban to transport bodies. So there were always body bags, under the back seat. And sometimes we'd go on cases with him. And it was just literally, we were sort of drenched in this death investigation world because it was so much a part of what my parents did. And so when I grew up with all this, I didn't realize for a while how much I actually knew about this world, about criminal investigation and forensics. And it wasn't until I really started taking my writing seriously that people were saying, you know a lot about this. How do you know so much about this? And when you start writing to really, you start figuring out, well, what is it I'm going to write about? Who am I? What do I have to say to the world? And all of my ideas started to trend toward like crime and mystery. And it was kind of then, after about 10 years post college, when I started taking courses and really working at this as a craft, that I merged my sort of forensic world that I had grown up with, my writing world. And as a result of that, I said, wow, this forensic field, as you guys know, because you see it every day, is really big. And so I went back to school. I went to the Forensic Academy in Los Angeles and took training so that I could just learn myself and be immersed in it. And it was an amazing experience. I'm still friends with a lot of the people who taught classes there and classmates, because they were such a welcoming community, and it gave me so much information and insight into the rest of the forensic world. And yeah, so that's kind of how it all started for me in terms of merging these 2 worlds. And as a result of that Forensic Science Academy, we had to do a project, right? And that's actually how this book came about. So I was the only writer in the class. There we go. I was the only writer in the class. And I asked the academy, the head of the academy, could I just like write something for writers, just sort of give us as a community, because there's so many crime shows out there, right? And mystery, like you go to the bookstores, you turn on the TV, you can even throw a stone without hitting a crime or mystery genre. I'm sure you guys all have your favorites and different ones you watch. And so I want to write something just for my, sort of really just for my benefit, to kind of put all this knowledge together. And then my friends started pushing me, and they're like, no, you need to publish this book. So they sort of pushed me into it and found a publisher. And so this is the culmination of that experience. So I think it's so humbling to me, because I really just meant it to be for me and maybe some of my friends to help us as we were writing crime. And just this week, I got this amazing little Facebook message from this gentleman in Uganda. And he says, thank you so much. We follow you here in Uganda. And I have a friend, she works as a as a crime scene investigator. And your book and your work has helped us here so much. So, wow, not what it was intended, not what I expected, but just very humbled that, something, you never know, I guess, what your work, where it's going to go and who it's going to help and affect. So anyways, that's my background. And now I write screenplays for TV and film. I write books, currently working on about 6 different projects right now. I also do some true crime. And I also get to speak. And I love this part of my job. I love meeting people, and especially people like you have a different insight into this world. And I always love hearing what people who have boots on the ground, you're in this, even if, civil, criminal, you're in this every day. And so it's always fun for me to be a part of communities like this, who I consider the real heroes out there fighting crime and being a part of the justice system. All right, so that's a little bit about me. If you want to stay in touch, my email is up here. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, and I do have a monthly newsletter. You can access it through, well, if you get that freebie, you'll be signed up. You can also access it through my website. And I just kind of do all sort of forensic things and what I'm working on, and just kind of fun little newsletter. All right. So today, what we're going to do today, just kind of a mini forensics science academy, just sort of an overview of the field, some forensic fundamentals, and really just investigative protocols from crime to courtroom. So again, if you have questions, please jump in. I'd love to answer them if you have anything specific. Okay. All right, and that brings us to our first book giveaway. So typically I do this when we're like in an in-person class setting. Instead, since we're this way, let's have you answer these questions in the chat. So basically, when you answer a question, it registers you into the drawing for the free book. And the first free book is this guy, the big old Forensic Speak book. So we'll just go through. I'm actually just going to do the first 8. There's no tiebreakers here. We're just entering. So number 1, if you have worked in some area of death investigation, law enforcement, or criminalistics, just throw in the chat. If you want to be enrolled into this drawing, just throw into the chat what area that was, or just a little quick comment. If you have touched a dead body, and it has to be non-relative, not a parent, not some grandma or something like that. If you've ever touched a dead body, I want to hear about it. Put it in the chat if you want to be entered for the drawing. All right, number 3. If you have interviewed somebody who works in death investigation or law enforcement or criminalistics of some, and then just a little chat, a little bit about that. Number 4, have you ever smelled human decomposition? Number 5, have you ever found a dead body, non-job related, of course, but have you ever stumbled upon a dead body or remains? Number 6, if you can tell me the difference between a coroner and a medical examiner, enter that into the chat. If you've ever been inside of a morgue before, let me know about that. Or if you've ever witnessed an autopsy before, let's hear about that. I'll let you guys take a few seconds to just kind of look through those and answer and get registered. And from all of those comments, if our lovely hosts could, in the end of this, pick a winner for us, that would be awesome. And while you guys are just entering your comments, I'll just tell you a couple, I'll tell you a quick story about my youth and how the first experience I remember of death investigation. So I like to say I did my first death investigation case when I was 8 years old. So what happened was we lived in a pretty small area, and there was a small airfield, a small airport there. And one night, it was April actually, there was a plane that crashed. It was just a small plane. There were 3 people on board and everybody passed away. Everybody was killed. And of course, my dad went out to the scene that night with the police and everybody, and they investigated the scenes the best that they could. And as you know, like with airplane crashes, it's a pretty spread out scene. There's a lot of debris, both mechanical and human, that's involved in airplane crashes. And so they do the best they can. It's dark, it's foggy, it's raining, there's not a lot of light. Next morning, Sunday morning, we all head off to church, as we do as a family. And after church, my dad says, I want to go back to the airfield now that it's a light, bright, sunny morning and see if we missed anything. So me, my mom, my sister, and I, we get into the family Suburban and we drive over to the airfield after church, and we're all in our Sunday best with our little Sunday patent leather Sunday school shoes and, you know, the little socks with the little lace around them, all white. And my dad says to my sister and I, ladies, girls, let's come on out. Come with me and we're going to go investigate this scene together. And we had no idea. We had no idea what he was talking about. We just thought it was cool to be a dad. So we hop out of the car, and I think my mom was just groaning because it's like all muddy, and she's probably thinking, how am I going to get these socks and dresses clean? But he takes us and he has us go one on either side of him. And we're just walking through this field, right? From the runway, like the field off of the runway. And he just tells us, look, just keep your eyes to the ground. And if you see anything that just looks unusual, doesn't look like it belongs to nature, just let me know. So we're walking and walking, and all of a sudden we spot something. My sister and I spot something, and we're like, Dad, you know, of course we're trying so hard to find whatever this thing is. We have no idea, but just anything we can do to help. What is that something? Is that something? And he stops us all. He looks down, and he plucks up this little piece and he puts it in the palm of his hand and he says, yes, you found something. And we're like, what is it? It's like a quarter, you know, like the size of a quarter. And he's like, that is a little piece of brain. That's brain matter. And he explains to us what brain matter is and what the brain does, the function of the brain. And he tucks it away in his little bag, and off we go. And a few minutes later, you know, we're so excited because we've actually done something useful and helpful. And what's that, Dad? Is that something? Is that something? And he stops and he looks and he picks it up and he's like, oh my goodness, you found another thing. He puts it in his hand. It's very small again. He's like, this is a piece of skull. You found some skull. And we're like, of course, we have no idea what that means. He explains to us that skull is made from bone, and bone protects the brain like a helmet. And it's all very, you know, scientific anatomy lesson. And he puts it back into his little baggie, and off we go. And that was my first death investigation case. So that's a little insight into, the world of forensics as I experienced it. There are so many more stories, but we are going to get on to the rest of this presentation. Okay, I think I see the chat slowing down. So I think we've got I can't wait to read these later. Lots of answers. Thank you guys. This is great. Yes, this is great. So many people don't know the difference between a medical examiner and a coroner. Of course, you guys would. I love it. Yes, this is great. So good. Yes, morticians. This is so wonderful. Okay, thank you all. Thank you all. So great. We'll pick a winner. We'll pick a winner. Okay, move on from this screen. Okay, part 1, forensic fundamentals. So basically, forensic science is just simply, and you probably know this, but it's such a simple definition, the application of science to the law, right? So all that stuff that happens before you see it in the courtroom, that's all the application of science. They have to get it all right in order to bring it to the final destination in the courtroom. So the application of science to the law. One second here. So as you know, it can take a very long time to get to that point. Of course, we don't see that reflected on television. It's usually a very short process, but it can take months, days, months, years to get all of the right science and all of the right evidence and able to get it properly connected to the laws that we have to actually try somebody for a crime. Working in forensic science. So this is certainly not a comprehensive list. What's a pretty thorough list. There are so many parts and pieces to the criminal investigation process. And you guys are not on there. Shame on me. I was like, oh, report writer, not quite. But there's, anything from autopsy technician, ballistics expert, there's tons now in digital. Computer forensics is a huge field that's emerging because we have so much theft online, as you know. And it just goes on and on. Forensic, I've even heard of forensic jewelers, forensic nurses, of course, very important. Tons of people, right? Pathologists, aides, polygraph examiners. There's a really broad field. And I'm sure that when you look at this field, especially if you're more involved in criminal law and criminal investigations in the courtroom, you probably may see some of these people showing up, right? As testimony, they might be testifying as professionals in a certain case. It's possible you could see a good number of these kinds of people showing up in your courtroom. So it's just kind of, I think, good to know that there's really a wide, a big toolbox of people that are involved in taking, again, all that science, right? The application, these are all the people that are trying to use science to apply it to the law. So huge amount of people. Let's see here. I'm going to click to the next one. Okay, sort of an overview too of just, and I cover all of this in my book, Forensic Speak, but really this is kind of a nice overview where you can see that there's so many parts to, again, that application of science to the law. So crime scene investigation, right? That's a whole thing within itself. And it's very time sensitive, right? Because when a crime happens, there's just a certain amount of time that the investigators have to really take a look at that scene, gather what they need, make sure they have everything they need, if they even know what they need. There's a lot of that in itself is an art, not so much a science. And so that part of crime scene investigation is a huge, that's the starting point of it all. If there's a death involved, if there's some sort of homicide or accidental death or suicide involved, then there's a whole death investigation part. And if we have time, we'll get into a little bit about that, since that's sort of where, I have a lot of knowledge. Then there's the whole realm of toxicology and pathology, right? So what is flowing in our blood, what sort of substances or evidence, right, if is in our blood or in our tissues. And that itself is a whole science. And so that whole application of that science to the law can play a huge part. And then we have this other realm of forensic science, which is just the digital investigation, right? And again, so, this is, you guys, like, compared to 10 years ago, this field is exploding because there's just so much rampant crime going on over the internet and digitally. And I'm sure I know I've had things breached countless times, probably a half a dozen to a dozen times, credit cards breached or accounts or whatever. We're all kind of victims of that. And then you have like the bigger crimes as well, and the dark web and all that. So that's an enormous part of computer science, right, being applied again to the law. Then we have behavioral sciences, which I know some of you guys, I know this to me is very fascinating because this is sort of what makes criminals tick, what the sort of the psychology behind criminal behavior. There's entire TV shows written about this, entire books written about this. And again, so that's the psychology, the science of psychology is a whole nother science that we can take and apply it to a crime, and then be able to bring it into a courtroom to try to figure out, was this criminal crazy? Was there something mentally wrong with them? Did they know what they were doing? Just many ways of looking at the mind, how the mind works, and what part that played in the crime at hand. Okay. Then we have like kind of what I consider like the tangible sciences, like physical evidence kind of sciences. So fingerprint science. Now, fingerprints have been around, the science of fingerprints have been around a very long time, at least 150 years. And that is in itself, I know we don't hear much about it, but it's still one of the top ways that we really can identify people. If somebody has been somewhere, if you can find a fingerprint and match that fingerprint or thumbprint or palm print or toe print, if you can match that to someone, it's still a very, very useful and how do I say, it's a very strong identifier because everybody's fingerprints are completely individual. So like DNA, we share, right? And especially twins, people that have matching DNA, it's the same strands, it looks the same, but the twins' fingerprints are going to be completely different. It's really a very unique individual identifying marker that we all have. And so again, taking that science of fingerprint, how do fingerprints work? What do they look like? And how do you identify them? And taking that again into the courtroom, into the law, how do we connect those two? And then of course, DNA science, which is ever emerging and getting better and better all the time, but it has its flaws. I think it's great, and it is definitely getting better. We're getting more and more specific about it. But again, it's not 100% as like fingerprints. But again, you have this, and as you were saying, like it's thankfully like we're seeing now that the use of DNA science to actually, instead of incriminating people, freeing them from something that they haven't done. So it's just this explosion of applying this science to the law in ways that not just show us if somebody was there or committed a crime, but if they weren't there. And that's just as important, because now we have these beautiful ways, more and more ways to know, to be sure, I guess, or to have a little more certainty about somebody's guilt or innocence. Then we also have blood spatter science, right? That's the physical way. You have blood identifiers, but now we can, you also have this sort of physical, tangible, what the patterning of blood and what that says about a violent crime. And so taking that science, it's very much a science. It uses physics to say, okay, the person was standing here and was hit this direction, and the blood went that way, or it was a high velocity or medium velocity or low velocity. So that whole category of blood, how does blood, work in space and time? And that science, applying that to a case, again, to determine, is it going to go to court or not? How is that going to go in line with arresting someone or prosecuting someone? Science to the law. And then we have ballistics. Again, yes, Dexter is such a great example. I love that. And I think Dexter was really the one show that really showed us this is a real science. And like, it really, even when they take liberties, this is a real science. This really does help people who are trying to determine the legality of this situation and the criminality of this situation. Like, it really helps determine something about what happened at that moment that the crime happened. And then ballistics. So that again is another kind of very physical science, right? And it's been around a bit. Some of these are newer, some of these have been around a bit, and they're just getting better and better. So ballistics meaning like guns, right? Bullet trajectories, and what kind of gun was used, and was it close range, medium range, long range. There's so much to the science of ballistics and being able to match a certain bullet or casing to a certain gun, and looking at striation marks on that bullet. And again, all this is covered in my book in much more detail. It's just really, really amazing that we have these very physical, tangible, it's physical evidence actually. So that's kind of sort of our overview of when you come into a case, right? When you're coming into a case, it's come to your courtroom. Almost all this stuff is part of that. You're looking at whatever, the prosecutors, they're looking at everything they possibly can in this realm, right? Anything that could possibly help in any one of these sciences to apply it to the law. And then last but not least, right, we have courtroom procedures, and that's where you all have a lot of expertise and a lot of time and a lot of hours. So then all this stuff finally makes it into the courtroom if warranted, right? And if admissible, and if you have the right, as you know, there's a lot of laws to actually, and things that have to be satisfied in order to actually get it there. But then the final kind of part of forensics is the actual courtroom procedures, which I'm not going to really spend a lot of time on, because you're probably even more versed in that than I am. All right, let's see here. All right, I'm just going to pause, just a quick look at the questions and see if there's anything I can quickly answer. Oh, do you use an MVAC machine or solved anything, or have you ever solved something collecting DNA in that way? I don't, some full disclosure, I don't actually work in this field. I'm more of an academic in this field, but I am familiar with those machines. And so, yeah, I think they're good. I think we're seeing, which I'm really excited about, we're seeing more of like the portable DNA machines being able to come onto scenes, mass scenes where there's like mass murders or mass victims, or even just for victims of sexual assault who may never want to step into a hospital to get any sort of DNA testing. This is something that law enforcement can bring to them and can be done very discreetly to try to immediately help get DNA and solve that case, find the, so yeah, it's really cool. But again, as you are aware, it always comes down to funding. So are these police departments or law enforcement departments, are they able to afford these? It's very county by county, department by department. So I hope someday they're in wide use. Yes, they are very pricey. I've seen them, what's the word, demonstrated. I went to a demonstration at the Writers Guild of America, and it was really cool. It was just kind of, it's one of these things, it's almost life-changing, where you're like, wow, this could really change the way we do that initial crime scene investigation. So I hope it becomes more widely used. Okay, I'm gonna just quickly click to the next one. Okay, so now CSI protocol from crime to courtroom. So we're gonna just kind of talk a little bit about what happens when, who responds to the scene first, who's in charge, how to process a crime scene, what happens to the evidence, and what if there's a body, the ultimate murder. It doesn't always have to be murder, but it's more exciting if we say that. Okay, so protocol so from 911 call to courtroom, that's really what we are looking at here. So a crime happens. We have to have that, right? A crime happens somewhere in time, and somebody, we don't always, somebody reports it. That could vary, as we know. So somebody reports it. The law enforcement agencies are called in, right? So that's typically going to be your local police. They're usually the first responders to that. So sometimes it's fire, but most often it's your police, your law enforcement. They're going to be the first on the scene. The first thing that they're going to try to do, if there's not a person who's injured or needing medical help, is to try to secure that and isolate that crime scene, because it's not like on TV where they walk in and like this, we know this is where the crime happened, and it's like this neat little line. You don't often know how wide the scene is, like where the evidence is. So you want to make sure that that area is safe. You want to make sure people are away so that they're not contaminating it. They're not putting themselves in danger or putting you in danger. That's the main thing. Secure that scene, then isolate the crime scene. So it can be really challenging and for a law enforcement person to know, how big is this crime scene? Think about mass shootings, like that's really hard. Was it just inside? Was it just in this room? Was it in several rooms? Was it also outside? Where did it start? Where did it end? So that's the first thing that they're going to try to do. Also, simultaneously, they're going to attend, of course, to any medical emergencies. That always comes first. You definitely want to make sure that people are being tended to and get them the help that they need. They're going to also be at this point removing any unauthorized people or press. Usually press come later, but I mean, especially like look at it, we're all the press, right? We all have these little guys, our little cell phones, and we're recording everything. So they want to, it's important to just really secure and isolate that area so they can do their job and do it well, so that they can be able to make sure that they're trying to get whatever possible evidence and pieces that they need, that they can prove scientifically to, again, apply it to the law. It's always going in to these situations. It's really always, it's in what's in the back of people's head. Police. My dad always thought of the, medical examiners, anybody who's doing these investigations, almost, especially these kind of first and second investigators, you're always thinking, is this going to go to court? How is this going to play out? So you're always trying to think about protecting the integrity of the crime scene and the integrity of the evidence, and the integrity of just everybody who's involved, because you just don't know where it's going to end up. But you're often thinking, this could end up in court. And if it does, I need to make sure that I have all my scientific ducks in a row and that I followed the right protocols so that we can use the correct science to be able to, again, apply it to the law. And I'll give you some funny examples of how that doesn't always end up to be the case. So your first investigators are typically your police officers, and then your second investigators are those like CSI, crime scene investigating people, forensic photographers, medical examiners, or coroners, anybody who also has to collect evidence, whether it's photographic evidence, video, physical evidence, the body, etc. And then last, after that's all packed up and everybody's gotten everything that they need to the very bitter end, and it could take hours, it could take a couple days. It really depends on the scope of the crime involved. Then the very last people, they can unsecure the scene, they can open it up, and then the very last people are going to be your basically your crime scene cleanup technicians, if they are called in, which oftentimes they are. We don't think about those people very often, like, oh, someone's got to clean up this mess. Oh, okay, great. So they will be the very last people who will be on your crime scene, and much later, after it's already been opened and unsecured. One little, Sunshine Cleaning is like, I know it's a fun movie. I love that movie. It's a great example. Great example. Okay, one interesting little fun thing to note is that a lot of people don't think about this, but when you are when you're in a live, secured crime scene, there is no eating, there is no drinking, there is no smoking, there is no littering. And this is because why? All of these things could contaminate the crime scene. So, if you're talking about, it gets kind of taxing, and I'll get to some of the realities of the job, but that's a long, and of course, yes, thank you. In the movies and TV, they do all that, especially the older TV and movies, right? Or is doing the smoking and flick the button to the crime scene. Like, no, that's not acceptable. That's your DNA now in the crime scene. So, all right. Okay, I'm going to click to the next one. So Gibbs should not be taking his coffee into every crime scene. No, but I do understand it. Coffee is important. Okay, so now what happens when we are actually, how does a crime scene get searched? And there are many ways of doing this depending on the type of scene and where it is located. So it's very, of course, vital, as you know, to record the scene. It is often done in various ways with still photography, camera, traditional camera, and often in video, and oftentimes in sketches. I know that law enforcement and CSIs we had to do this in school. We had to actually sketch out the room. Like we had to do mock crime scenes and we had to sketch out the room just hand drawn, but then we also had to take pictures. And if we had video, we would have to do video. And now they have those cool little things where they put the video camera, it's like a 360 video camera. And so some more departments that have a little more money can invest in those kinds of more upgraded equipment where they put this little camera on a tripod in the middle and it does a 360 video of the whole area. So those are all ways that you have to measure, people are going to be like taking out tape, and measure how big the room is, how much from here to here. So yeah, there's a lot of recording that goes on, which is why it takes so very long to go nitpicking through this entire scene to make sure you have gotten everything and everything's exact, as every little detail matters. How far was a bullet casing from the victim, and many details. So then there's when you're actually searching, so you don't just kind of like trample into a scene, right? There's a methodology to this. Again, depending on how big your crime scene is. So basically 5 different kinds of search patterns. The first one is just a line search, and that looks like what's on this slide right here. So you're starting at one point, you're going straight, and then you're going over 1 foot and you're coming back. And you keep doing that pattern until you've methodically gone through your whole room, right? Then there's a grid system. In the grid system, now think about a grid, right? You're doing the same thing as a line search, but now you're doing it in a grid pattern. So you're going one direction and then the other direction. And this is probably this is better for a situation where it's a bit bigger of an area or an exterior area. And it's done so that you're really it's almost like it's a double tracking system, right? Then number 3 is your spiral system. Typically, you're not going to do this in like a bedroom or a living room. This is for an area where it's a big area, typically outside. So pretend you're starting in the middle. So like pretend you're in a football field. If you're doing a spiral search pattern, you'll start in the middle and then you spiral out, right, in bigger concentric circles all the way around. Another sort of sister idea to this is a wheel search. And this is, and sorry, the numbers behind this are indicating how many people. So like a line grid, maybe 2 people, a line or grid, 2 people, spiral, typically just 1. A wheel, you're going to have 3 or more people, because what you're going to do is you're in that football field and you're in the center and you're all standing in the middle, and then you're all going to go out in your own pie, right? So you pretend the football field is broken up like a piece of pie, and everybody gets a slice of that pie, and you get that little part. You get that, so it's like a big wheel with all the spokes and all the slices of pie. So each person gets a pie. Within that pie piece, you can do a grid, you can do a line search at either or both of those things. And then there's a quadrant search. So now let's pretend we're in our football field again. And now let's break up the football field into big chunks, big squares, right? So let's say 8 by 8. And everybody gets, you're going to have 3 more people. So everybody gets a square. And within that square, you can do a line, you can do a grid, you can do a spiral. So that way you're putting a lot of eyes on a big area but breaking it down to do it very quickly. So those are the basic search patterns when you're at a crime scene. All right. Okay, and now evidence, right? Evidence, now we're in the scene, we're doing our little search. Hold on 1 second here. I'm gonna get, there we go. We're doing our searches. What are we looking for? It's kind of like me and dad and sister in the field. We're looking for anything, anything possible that just doesn't look normal. And so now you're going to be, these are the basic types of evidence. So biological, let's just start with biological. This is probably typically going to be within the body, within the person, but sometimes it's without. It's the blood, the urine, the saliva, the skin, the semen. That's all biological evidence that somebody's going to be looking for in that scene. And let's just pretend it's a living room. Okay, we'll just picture a living room right now. So it's sometimes hard to see this, right? And so there's different tests you can do. And again, all covered in my book. There's all kinds of, and you've seen some of these on TV with the luminol tests and all that. But these are tricky to see. And so, and these are always done, typically these are usually, especially the blood tests are done last when looking for blood that may not be evident, because a lot of times with these chemicals like luminol, once you use it, it ruins anything else. So like you can use it once and after that it's done. It's like a one and done. I'm going to come back to circumstantial because that's a little different. So impression evidence, you might be looking, this is like anything that impresses into another thing, right? So your shoe print impresses into mud. Your teeth prints impress into, I don't know, styrofoam or whatever you're chewing on, a piece of cardboard. Another person, tire tracks impress. And so this is something that you're looking for, these kinds of impression sort of marks in your crime scene. Anything that looks, maybe somebody had the styrofoam cup and they bit, I used to do this, you kind of chew the edge of the styrofoam cup. Well, that's giving clues to who I am, right? Because my teeth have a very distinct pattern, different than anybody else's teeth. So that's immediately going to be an identifying mark of who I am, chewing on that styrofoam cup. So let's take that cup and let's process it, and let's take that science of dentistry, forensic dentistry, and apply it to the law and try to make a match. Then we have, I'm going to skip direct and come back to that, physical. So physical evidence is, again, right, tangible, anything we can see and touch and smell and maybe even taste. Don't recommend it. But so fiber, soil, casings, a bullet hole, a shoe print, a fingerprint. These are all physical things. So it's very, it's a piece of chewing gum. Any of that is, little skull or little brain matter. It's biological, but it's also physical. It's both categories. And then trace evidence is a subset of physical, right? It's just a little bit, right? A tiny bit, a strand of hair, a skin cell, a thread, a glass shard, little granules of sand. And so it's really important when you're going through these crime scenes, they have to be so observant for every little detail. And it takes a while. And what I've heard from my friends who are crime scene investigators is that it also is kind of an art to it. Like after you've done so many, you start to know what to look for, and you start to see, you just sort of have a sense for what to look for at a certain scene. And I know that they also, one of the tips we got in our forensic academy was always look up. Like people forget to look up, but there might be something on the ceiling, right? And there's been cases where investigators just simply forgot to do that one little thing, looking up, and there was blood, or there was a bullet hole, or something went through the roof, or it takes time. It's an art to investigating and looking for all of these things, all these pieces of evidence. So direct evidence is a little different. This is things like photographs, video, witness testimony. We have so much of this now with because everybody's filming everything all the time, security cameras, people. So that's very direct evidence where somebody's filming, a criminal coming out of a gas station with a bag of money or something. So our security camera caught that. That's great. Now we have a pretty good piece of direct evidence as to who that might be. Okay, circumstantial is where I find a heartbeat as a writer. And maybe you guys have experienced this as well, but from what I have read and heard about cases that actually make it to court, most of the time it's circumstantial evidence that actually is being brought to the case. It's not like television, as you know, is not like television where there's so much direct evidence and biological evidence and physical evidence. It's a lot of times circumstantial. So it's what somebody heard or noticed or deduced or inferred, right? And you're putting all those pieces together to make a line towards pointing to a specific person who committed a crime. And everything it's like putting a puzzle together, right? Everything has to kind of fall into line to point there. What this person said at this time, what this person heard at this time. And it's like a big game of Clue, honestly. And I find it so fascinating because so much of this circumstantial evidence depends on these prosecutors and defense attorneys going out and talking to people and trying to find those links or trying to break those links, right? Because defense attorneys are trying to break those links. Prosecutors are trying to find those links. And it's not black and white. And that's what makes our one of the things I think that makes our judicial system so challenging is because it's not always black and white. You have this DNA and this, bullet casing and this strand of hair, and it points directly and it's a clear cut line. It's just not always there. A lot of times the evidence isn't there. And I think it's really challenging. As a writer, I love it because it makes for good drama. It makes for good suspense. You kind of never know where the story is going to go. But it's really challenging for people who are in your position, people, defense attorneys, prosecutors, the accused, the innocent, the guilty, everybody, the judges, the juries. It's very challenging. I can't imagine being a jury member sometimes, although I think it'd be fascinating. And I've tried to get a jury so often and I keep getting kicked off. But this is sort of what you're going to hear, especially in a criminal case. This is the toolbox they have to draw from, and that's it. Like this is it. This is the evidential toolbox. All right. Any questions so far? take a little drink.
Yeah. Did you see the Q&A? There was a question in Q&A.
Oh dear.
We can read it to you.
Yeah, please. I think I lost it.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. 1 second. Okay. So Miranda says, I'm from Wisconsin. Do you have any opinions about how the forensic aspects of the case of Stephen Avery from Netflix's Making a Murderer was handled? Thank you.
I know, right? I followed that whole thing. I was obsessed. Oh my gosh, it's been a long time since I thought about that. You know, I'm going to be honest, because I feel like I'm in this very lovely position, so grateful to be in this lovely position where I understand the real world of this process and lived it for a long time and studied it. But then I also understand the Netflix, the Hollywood version, because I've been working in that world for 20 years. And I know both in unscripted and scripted how projects get made and what writers do and what producers do to get projects made. And all I have to say is, I don't care how much true crime, it's entertainment. So I don't even want to comment on it because I wasn't there. I didn't look through all of the things that, I didn't look through the case file, right? I don't know. And I'm sure that there are things in that case file that the producers of the Netflix series were not privy to. So I don't know. I think it's made for fascinating entertainment. But I think there's probably a lot more to this story. Because I know all those things get put together. It's tough. I had the great pleasure to sit in on a trial a few years ago for research. It was a cold case trial, and it's a case that my family and I had been following for 25 years because my dad was the medical examiner on the case. And it was a very brutal rape and murder in our county. And not just like, we're not a particularly murderous county, you know, it's rural. And when these things happen, it really shakes the community, right? And it really shook our community. And this girl was 18 and innocent. I mean, it just rocked the community. And so for 25 years, they were trying to find enough science to apply it to the law. They knew who did it, but it was finding the right science and all those different kinds of sciences we talked about, finding the science that would actually be able to apply and to be able to apply an arrest and take it to court. And they finally were able to do it. And I got to sit in on this 3-week trial, and it was amazing. It was 2 full juries simultaneously because 2 brothers were being convicted at the same time. And it was better than any reality show I've ever seen. I was just riveted from, 9 a.m. until 5 every day. And all I can say from that experience is that there's just so much more to the story. And then what I did with all that, because I did that on purpose, is I wanted to see if there was something there that I could write about. And as I sat through 3 weeks of this, I took copious notes and the story started to form. And it was amazing. It took me a while to write it, but it came out in 2020. It's called Hole in the Woods, and it's a thriller based on this true crime. It is coming out next month on audiobook through Blackstone. And all I can say is I had to, as a creator, as an artist, right, as an entertainer, I had to pick and choose which parts of that story I knew were going to create the most tension, the most suspense, the most thrill. It's my job to pull at emotion, right? To pull you into the story and to give you that ride. That is my sole job. My job is not to be a journalist at that point. It's solely to sell books. And I don't say that flippantly, because I became very good friends with the victim's father. We are still friends and very close. And I am very respectful of the story and his situation. And I had his blessing, and he read the first draft and gave me his notes and his blessing. So I'm not saying like I'm casting all that to the wind and I don't care, but I know that somebody, you know, sitting at Netflix or HBO or whatever is doing the same thing I did. They're looking at the scope of this story and they're picking out what are the things I can choose that are the most tantalating, thrilling, that will thread this story in a way that hooks viewers and so that they want to binge this. So I hope that makes sense. Anyways, so, okay. Yes, Sharon, good points. She says, so what is riveting to me may not be to others. You are absolutely right. But as a storyteller, I'm trained to know what that is. Like I've spent, you know, it's almost like psychology, right? We take a lot of classes and do a lot of workshopping of our work to know what hits right with people. So if something's not hitting, my mentors will tell me, my editors will tell me. So again, I might think it's riveting, but if it's not riveting to other people, I will quickly find out and it will have to be changed. So, or does not sell. Okay. So that's a great question though, but thank you. And yes, but still we're all going to keep watching these shows and reading these books because we love them. And I have a whole theory on why we love them. And okay, so moving on to, so we've got all our evidence, right? Now we have to collect it, we have to package it, right? That's all has to be done at the scene. Depending on what type of evidence, it might get a manila or like a paper envelope or a paper bag, especially if it's biological, because biological evidence can, mold is probably the wrong word, but go bad if it's in plastic. Pill boxes are used, sealable plastic bags for non-biological evidence. When it's arson, they get put into metal canisters, because you're talking a lot about things that are probably charred or ashy, or you need to contain them tightly. Then of course, always, you know, gloves, masks, eye protection, shoe covers, disposable forceps, anything to protect us from contaminating the scene. And even little things like, I know we said no drinking, smoking, eating, you know, littering, but also even just sneezing or coughing. So probably, you know, the wearing of the mask is a really good idea. Eye goggles, you know, you don't even want to sneeze or cough onto the scene, because if you do, that can completely disrupt the evidence, especially DNA evidence. Throwing up at the scene, Barbara, is definitely prohibited, looked frowned upon. So if you're going to do that, step outside. This case I was just telling you about that I went to, one of the professional expert witnesses, she was in toxicology, I think, or pathology, and she had been re-examining the DNA from this case, because when the case happened, there was really, at that time, DNA was very young and it was not really widely used. The testing was not widely being done yet. And so she was retesting what little DNA they had from this, and she accidentally sneezed on this slide and completely contaminated one of the slides. And she had to admit that in court, just, you know, this one is inadmissible, or I forget what the term was, because of this situation. And, you know, the DA called her out on it, and it's interesting. Sometimes things happen. So, okay. And I'm going to click to the next one. Chain of custody, as you probably know, is very, very, very important. It just simply refers to the continuity of possession. So once you have the evidence that's been recorded and brought to the crime lab, that should be its first stop from the crime scene immediately to the crime lab. And I see we have an OJ, yes, an OJ investigation comment here. And that's exactly kind of what went wrong there. It did not go immediately from crime scene to the lab. And that was a huge lesson. And actually that was a turning point in criminal investigation in our country. A big awareness at that point of, whoa, we got to be better. We got to be tighter about this. So that continuity of possession is very important. So then anytime somebody comes in contact with this evidence, you have to list who came in contact, what they did with it, initial, location, date that they messed with it or tested it or whatever. So you're going to have kind of like this chain, right, of who was always where always was and who had it at what point and what they were doing with it. And you really want to keep this to a very small minimum, or a lot of questions get asked, holes can be punched, and you could lose a case this way if these records are not kept really, really pristinely. Okay, let's see. Nobody's perfect. So we kind of talked about that with the sneezing. Sometimes you're on a scene and shoe prints get erased because you don't know, or you accidentally swipe off a fingerprint. People drive or walk through scenes. Sometimes scenes are left open for a long time, right, before anyone even knows it's a crime scene. Critters could take things. The weather could mess it up. The blood could be gone. There's just a million things that could happen to evidence, because it's not like a crime is committed and then right away it's found. Not always. So, all right. And then, so we submit everything to the crime lab, everything, right from the scene, it goes right to the crime lab. Then if there's a body, and it's only, has to do with cases where a body is involved, now we get to remove the body, deliver that body to the morgue. Now we get to ensure that the crime scene is safe and ready for cleanup and can be released. Then, of course, from this point, if there's a corpse involved, then an autopsy and a whole, forensic investigation, medical investigation can be done on any corpses, deceased that are involved. And then also, while this is all happening right now, all that evidence that got brought back to the crime lab or toxicology, or wherever it has to go, ballistics, DNA, now it starts to be tested. Now it gets into those cues and it can be tested. And as we know, those cues, it's not like TV where you drop it in the mass spectrometer and then, 5 seconds later, while they have a little conversation, the answers come out. It can be months, it can be weeks and months before that evidence gets tested. Then after all that's done, now you have the officer in charge, or the detective, whoever is sort of in charge of that original case. Now they can take all of that and they start writing the report. And so they're like what I like to call the project manager of the case. Now that as they're starting to get the evidence in and all of the reporting from the crime scene and the medical examiner, it's like they're collecting this big, vast, and now they get to write the big term paper, the big evidential term paper based on that case. And that can take time. It's a very long time. Because you're waiting for evidence, and then you have to go back and add it into the report. And then finally, yes, I would like to proofread and correct cops reports. Yes, I know. And I know. We actually had to take a report writing class at the academy. And there's just like we were graded. It was a very specific way you have to write them. And not everybody gets it perfect. And then finally, once you have all this, if there is, again, enough scientific evidence to bring it into the court of law, now you can bring that court case into law. And that's, where our prosecutors get involved and such. So that is, let me just make sure. Okay, that is sort of the overview. Last little section. There are, of course, realities to this job that I think really don't get talked about much at all on television, but we know they're huge realities. I'm sure you see them. First of all, there's the sights and smells of the job. Crime scenes are not pretty. They do not smell good. They are not pretty to look at. They can be very disturbing. It can be very traumatic sometimes. There's an emotional toll, a psychological toll for that. I've talked to many crime scene investigators, and even my father too. Everybody has this thing. I think this is interesting. Everybody sort of has this thing that bothers them. Like my friend who worked in Long Beach running their crime lab, she said she had all female staff. It was like the only one in the country. This is maybe 5 years ago. And she said, everybody, all in her staff, she's like, there's one thing that bothers them. And it was all different. And so they would try to assign cases so that person wouldn't have to deal with that. Like for one person, it was maybe elder abuse. Maybe another person, it was animals, another person, babies. My dad said it was always children. When he had to investigate the deaths of children, that was always very much the hardest thing for him. So it's a little bit different for everybody. You don't really hear about that emotional toll always, right? Holidays, like there's kind of no more holidays. You just get called out whenever. I mean, yes, people do get holidays, but I know in the case with my dad, like he was the only medical examiner for 25 years for 3 counties, and he didn't have a replacement. And let me tell you, people love to die on holidays. I cannot remember a single holiday that he did not get called out. Every single holiday, every single time called out. So it really can be disruptive to family life. Sometimes the other thing that's kind of a reality, sometimes people start to think like everyone's a criminal. It like really takes a toll on how you feel about humanity. And you have to really learn how to keep that in check, either with humor or counseling or however, prayer, meditation, whatever you need to do to keep your psychological, emotional state healthy. And can be hard to not see the world, as the glass is half empty. And then there's the paperwork hell. There's so much paperwork, which we never see that on TV or film either, but there's a huge amount of paperwork to this job, which I think leads a lot to burnout. There's a high burnout factor. And then now there's like a short staffing factor in a lot of law enforcement. Cold cases even worse. I work with the Cold Case Foundation and support them where I can. And they're a nonprofit organization that just is really trying to lend support to any law enforcement agency, and they do it all for free. And they're all, most of them are retired, either from FBI or law enforcement or whatever agency. And they know that people are, especially in the cold case area, it's just such a short staffing in the country. And so they're trying to help people, agencies and people solve these cases that probably wouldn't get solved otherwise. And then, of course, there's funding restrictions, right? Always that, budget restrictions. And then really, another reality of the job is that you're going to make some enemies because you're trying to, it's a criminal world, right? It's a black and white kind of world. And you're inevitably going to make enemies on the job. And whether those are typically, unlike what you see on TV, typically law enforcement agencies do play nice together and work well together, but a lot of times victims' families will not necessarily like you, or certainly the criminals' families are going to have something against you because you are trying to put their loved one behind bars. So yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, this world. Okay, so we're right at 12 o'clock. I want to leave lots of time here for any questions. I do not work with reconstruction specialists. I might know one or two, but I have never actually worked. I know some artists, I know some forensic artists who do that, who will do some of that work. But yeah, I have 2 sisters, and neither of them ended up in this field. So, yeah, none of us did. I guess maybe I came the closest, but I'm just the storyteller. So I kind of look at it as like my personal mission is, you know, I feel like I saw so much darkness growing up. I really got to, I don't know, got to see, but I really was introduced to really some dark recesses of the human experience. And so it's really my vision, my goal as a storyteller to shed hope and light into those dark experiences, because they exist and they're always going to exist, but it's what we do with them and how we react to them, and not being apathetic to them, and just really being hope and light. And so that's, yeah, both of my sisters really do the same. They have jobs where they're really sort of hope and light in the world. So let's see, what else do we have? For those who've been found guilty in the past and DNA was able to prove their innocence, is that proof with 100% certainty that they are innocent? I don't know, Ron. I'm guessing it's probably case by case. I honestly don't know the answer to that. DNA testing has gotten so good. I'm guessing that for them to be proven innocent has to be pretty conclusive, but not. I don't want to speak for the Innocence Project. So.
Oh my gosh, Jennifer, so fascinating. So there are some questions in the Q&A. If Olivia can.
Yeah. And I'm going to go to the end. I wish we had time to do the death, and it's okay. We did so much death investigation. We don't want to take ourselves down. So I'm going to just pull up my last screen again, so you can these are some of the books that I've written. This one's coming out in July, and where you can reach me, and don't forget to get your free gift, and let's talk more. Let's answer questions.
Awesome. Oh yeah, I'm so gonna get these books. They sound so cool. Okay, so one person had a question. Is there a case you can think of where a seemingly unrelated item or test result ended up being significant? I think it's just item or test result. There you go.
Oh wait. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you say?
No. Sorry. Is there a case you can think of where a seemingly unrelated item or test result ended up being significant?
That I can think of? I don't, oh gosh, I'd have to think about that. I'm thinking, I can just give this one little example I remember, because again, I'm more academic side. I don't do this day. I don't investigate. I investigate, fictional crime every day. But I do remember my dad doing this one case, and oh my gosh, I think he's actually just testifying about it now. And he's 81. He's still working as a physician and still testifying in cases that he worked on. But it was, DNA was not a thing yet, right? But he is very brilliant as a scientist. And he was reading a lot about what was going on, and saw that this was coming down the pipeline. And he told the detective, who was a very good friend of his, he said, it was, I think, a liver sample. There was a little bit of liver on the bullet casing, and not casing, and then ammunition part. And then he said, he also took liver from the body. And no, sorry, I'm getting this wrong. There's a little bit of liver on the bullet. And he said, keep this, because in a few years, you're going to be able to test that liver and know who it belongs to. And he did. The detective kept it. And the guy who was guilty, the guy who had he actually had some surgery, and they were able to get a sample, they would keep samples of things from surgery. Anyway, long story, they were able to match that eventually using DNA.
Oh my God.
So, and actually that was the first case in Michigan where they used DNA to convict someone.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Jennifer, do you know what year that was from?
Oh, I can't remember well, I think mid 80s, the guy would have been killed. And then it was probably like mid 90s before they, put it all together.
Wow.
And yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Or your dad is making, he knew it was coming and he gave great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
He took his job very seriously. So
yeah. Well, obviously, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So another question: doesn't the prosecutor have to present evidence that proves the evidence is what the prosecutor claims it is?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why it takes so long. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. You got to make sure, like, all this evidence, this science is legit and admissible. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And then Eileen Stearns, could you address the role of forensic genealogy in solving cold cases?
I love this. This is so good of a question, because you're right. You're spot on. And I've been doing a little research on this, but this is so up and coming, you guys. Like, this is just within the last couple of years. I mean, they sort of were doing, but now with all this DNA, 23andMe, blah, blah, blah. And yes, it's incredible. This is a very up and coming area of forensics. It's also a bit controversial when you start reading state by state who allows, who doesn't, because you're really tapping into people's private information. But when I'm telling you, when you sign those 23andMe and blah, 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 you're signing away quite a bit of your privacy. So be careful, please.
I know, it's so funny, and I probably shouldn't say this, and I don't think anybody in my family has killed anybody, but like, I'm afraid. Let's hope not. But I don't want it like to rat anybody out that I love, like I don't want to get a DNA test and have it go wherever.
I don't know.
I think of the weirdest things.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yes, the Golden State Killer, I love. That's a very interesting case. And I remember we talked, it was kind of happening when I was graduating from the academy, and it was the legality of what they were doing was a big issue, because they had to get the DNA from the brother in order to match it to this, pizza napkin soda cup from this guy that he had just tossed into the garbage, which when you toss something into a public garbage, it is public domain and they can grab your DNA. They don't need a warrant or whatever to grab that DNA. So anyways,
wow. That's just crazy.
It's all interesting. But yeah, I think you'll see more and more forensic genealogy popping up. So.
Oh my goodness.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I know there were a few questions along the way. Oh, okay. Where in northern Michigan are you from?
Oh, yeah. So I grew up in Fremont, which is an hour north of Grand Rapids. So west northern Michigan. Not like the UP or anything. So.
Oh my gosh. Do you think the owl did it?
Oh, I saw that. I didn't see it.
Oh, you didn't see it? Come on. It was not an owl. That is like whatever.
I've never seen it either.
The owl did it. Oh my gosh. I've seen that story and I'm sorry. I'm just not buying that it was an owl.
Oh goodness.
Anyway.
I hope this was somewhat helpful to you all. Or at least interesting. So.
I'm officially going vegetarian for lunch, Kimberly says.
Yeah.
No, it was so fascinating, Jennifer. Thank you so much.
Yes, definitely.
You're very welcome. It was really nice to be here with all of you. And will you ladies pick winners for the next?
Yes.
And then let me know, and I will mail these out to the winners, and everybody else grab your freebie.
For sure.
Let's see. Oh, I'll just put it back in the chat right there. There it goes.
There we go. Oh my gosh, right? Tia, I can't wait to start reading your books also.
Same. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm gonna download it as soon as I get home.
really.
it.
Yeah,
And
same.
if you have any forensic questions, let me know. Email me. So,
Well, thank you.
yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely.
It was so great to meet you.
And what are you doing after this? You're going somewhere?
I have to go to a wedding.
To a wedding. That's great. Oh.
Enjoy. Have a great afternoon.
Yeah, you too. Enjoy the rest of your conference, and everybody continue in excellence. Your work is so important. So important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very. All right.
All right. Thank you. Thanks so much. Talk to you later.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.